In a world where borders are tightening and rules are changing, the plight of Ukrainian refugees is more urgent than ever. Regulations governing their presence in Europe are shifting dramatically. As new barriers are erected, what does the future hold for those seeking safety? As of now, crossing borders requires only a valid biometric document. This decision slams the door shut on anyone still relying on expired passports. If individuals lack the new biometric passport, their entry and exit become impossible. In Finland, a country with a population of just over 5 million, the situation is equally dire. A previously supportive integration program, offering language courses and job assistance, has met an abrupt halt. The Minister of Finance has announced the end of funding for these programs, citing the burden of hundreds of millions of euros annually. Now, refugees are left to fend for themselves in the job market. Meanwhile, in Norway, the narrative shifts subtly. Here, Ukrainians can still access the labor market, yet securing a long-term status remains a formidable challenge. Employers face restrictions that prevent them from transitioning workers from temporary protection to full employment visas, stifling opportunities. The feeling of uncertainty looms, where working is possible, but the chances of remaining are slim and fading fast. Across Scandinavia, a clear trend emerges. The initial willingness to welcome Ukrainians is dwindling, replaced by a tightening of immigration policies. As social spending is slashed, stringent barriers are being erected, from paperwork to physical borders. The message is stark: only those who can integrate and contribute will be welcomed. For everyone else, doors are closing. In Canada, once seen as a beacon of hope for long-term relocation, new challenges are surfacing. The CUIT program that allowed temporary residence, work, and study is becoming a fast-fading memory. The Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, has confirmed that officials now have the authority to request military service documents from Ukrainian applicants. In rare cases, applicants are required to provide formal evidence of exemption from service or confirmation that they are not registered. Lacking this documentation could lead to the halting or even denial of permanent residency applications. Reports indicate that officials are enforcing a tight 7-day deadline for submission. Fail to comply, and your application is thrown out. What does this mean for countless individuals longing for stability? As legal pathways narrow, the looming question is, will the promises of safety endure, or are they merely illusions fading into the harsh reality of bureaucracy? The urgency presses on, as the struggle for survival continues amid shifting tides of policy and public sentiment. In a complex shift, Canada has not officially declared a systematic deportation of Ukrainians, yet the introduction of new requirements raises alarming concerns. The government is clearly trying to align its immigration policies with the harsh realities of military mobilization in Ukraine. Experts warn that this creates a precedent. If Canada tightens regulations and questions the residency of men of conscription age, other Anglo-Saxon countries might follow suit. The message for Ukrainians in Canada is unmistakable: navigating the process to obtain residency status is becoming increasingly arduous. Without complete documentation in hand, the hope for a favorable outcome dwindles significantly. Thus, Canada transforms from being an unconditional refuge into a land where legitimacy and transparency become paramount. As the European Union ramps up for significant changes that will directly affect all Ukrainians under temporary protection, a new electronic system is set to launch on October 1, 2025. The Entry-Exit System, EES, will create a digital database capturing every third country citizen's biometric data, fingerprints, and photographs upon entry and exit. Gone are the days of paper-based control with mere stamps marking arrival and departure dates. This unified digital system will meticulously track every boundary crossed, calculate the allowed duration of stay in the Schengen zone, and immediately register any transgressions, whether from entering with invalid documents or overstaying. As the phased implementation of this tracking system is completed by April 2026, no crossing into European countries will lack a digital trail. The subsequent initiative, the Electronic Travel Information System, ETIS, is also on the horizon, planned for launch at the end of 2026. Essentially, this will mirror the American ESTA system, requiring online applications, a fee of €7, and electronic travel authorization even for short visits. These developments denote a new level of oversight, as Europe shifts away from trust-based passport stamps towards comprehensive digital records. Could this be the dawning of a new era of immigration control, where every move is meticulously monitored? Expectations among refugees are palpable, as they brace for these sweeping transformations. Will they find a welcoming hand, or will the doors of opportunity continue to close? Germany currently hosts over 1.2 million Ukrainian refugees, and while their temporary protection status is guaranteed until March 2027, discussions are shifting. Rather than solely providing humanitarian aid, the focus is leaning toward integration and budget concerns. The federal government is tightening controls, with job centers now demanding proof of employment and active job seeking. Those unable to work without valid reasons are gradually facing stricter conditions for receiving benefits. In German media, the statistics raise eyebrows. The employment rate among Ukrainians is notably lower than that of other migrant groups, igniting debate among politicians eager for policy re-evaluation. Recently, Markus Söder, the Bavarian prime minister and leader of the Christian Social Union, boldly suggested that, if peace is nowhere in sight for Ukraine, it might be time to consider sending able-bodied men back. This statement resonated loudly, reflecting a growing conversation within German society about the sustainability of social support amidst low job engagement. Consequently, Germany is contemplating reforms to its migration system. For transitioning from temporary to long-term statuses, conditions now include stable employment contracts, sufficient income, language skills, and tax contributions. Experts indicate that, in the future, a steady income sufficient to support a family alongside stable work history will be essential for securing permanent residency. Discussions also include language exams and pension contributions. As Germany aims to retain Ukrainians capable of full integration and self-sufficiency. For everyone else, the future appears increasingly uncertain. In stark contrast, the Scandinavian nations are adopting a much firmer stance toward Ukrainian refugees. Sweden has already announced that, effective from October 1, 2025, it will no longer accept expired passports with consular stamps. Only valid biometric documents will suffice for crossing borders, a decision that directly impacts those who relied on extensions of old passports. Essentially, without a new biometric passport, entry and exit will become impossible. Finland has similarly revamped its policies. Once offering integration support through language courses and job placement assistance, Finnish officials have announced an end to such funding. For a nation with a population just over 5 million, the financial burden in the millions of euros annually has proven unsustainable. Refugees are now expected to pursue employment independently, a significant shift in responsibility. As these changes unfold, the looming question remains, what happens next for those caught in the shifting tides of policy and public sentiment? The path ahead appears treacherous. What if the sanctuary you once relied on turns into a ticking clock? A new chapter in Europe is unfolding for Ukrainian refugees, bringing not just extended protection, but also tightening measures that could jeopardize their future. Imagine waking up to find your status at risk, as Poland initiates employment checks and school attendance monitoring. Meanwhile, Germany considers the uncomfortable thought of recalling able-bodied men to serve. As of October 1, Sweden halts the acceptance of extended passports, introducing a biometric entry system that could leave many excluded. Canada follows suit, requesting military documentation from those seeking permanent residence. This whirlwind of changes intensifies the urgency. The fear of deportation looms heavy over countless families. At the onset of autumn, the European Union confirmed that the temporary protection regime is valid until March 4, 2026, with discussions underway to extend this for another year until 2027. This optimistic note, however, carries an underlying tension. On one hand, Europe acknowledges the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, on the other, it subtly hints at winding down emergency support. What does this mean for Ukrainian refugees? They can reside in the EU without a visa and have access to jobs, healthcare, and education. The catch? This temporary status does not equate to permanent residency. It was meant to be a stopgap, and increasingly, authorities emphasize that extensions won't last indefinitely. The political message is clear: Europe is willing to assist, but it expects integration in return. Within the next 2 years, Ukrainians will need to find new legal grounds to stay in Europe, whether through work contracts, education, or family reunification. Those unable to make this transition risk losing their documentation and face deportation. For millions, this marks the end of their honeymoon phase in Europe. While the EU continues to promise support, it is quietly constructing pathways to transition away from mass protection. The reality in Poland remains one of the primary destinations for Ukrainian refugees, where nearly 1 million currently reside. Yet, recent days have seen Parliament scrutinizing amendments that harden residency requirements. New laws dictate that adults must be employed officially, and children must regularly attend school. Regular checks will be the norm. Ignoring these requirements can lead to losing benefits. The societal mood is shifting, with surges in anti-migrant sentiments recorded across major cities. The government acknowledges rising tensions, using it as rationale for tightening regulations. Germany, housing over 1.2 million Ukrainian refugees, also faces a debate, shifting focus from humanitarian aid to integration and budgetary strain. Employment centers are now demanding proof of job hunting. Falling short of employment without a valid excuse could lead to stricter benefits restrictions. Critical voices emerge, like that of Bavaria's prime minister, who suggests a reconsideration of recalling mobilizable men back to Ukraine. His stance underscores a harsh reality: without substantive contributions to the job market, the support for Ukrainians cannot be sustainable. As these discussions unfold, immigrants will also find that the landscape in Scandinavia is changing. Sweden's upcoming policy reforms signal hardening attitudes toward refugees, demanding formal biometrics for entry. Finland has halted integration funding altogether, citing unmanageable costs, forcing refugees to find jobs independently. In Norway, while the labor market remains accessible, securing long-term residency proves challenging. Despite the ability to work, pathways to secure full status remain elusive, emphasizing a trend across Scandinavia that moves from welcoming to a barrier-filled environment. What awaits Ukrainian refugees is a sobering reality: assistance is still available, but only for those ready to prove their worth and commitment to integration. Countries that once embodied hope now signal uncertainty and constraints. As processes tighten, Canada has started to enforce stricter rules regarding military documentation from Ukrainian applicants, raising alarms among the diaspora. With the upcoming implementation of the EES entry-exit system in October 2025 and further shifts in policy, the path to stability may become increasingly intricate. With digital tracking for every entry and exit, failing to comply ensures that violations are logged. Gone are the days of trust in mere passport stamps. Now every interaction is under scrutiny. Every misstep could be catastrophic. The question looms: are those trying to rebuild their lives in Europe able to navigate this new labyrinth of rules, or will they find themselves at risk of being cast aside? As Europe transitions, its embrace of refugees falters, leaving many to ponder their next move. Can you imagine waking up one day, secure in your new home as a refugee, only to learn that everything is about to change? In Europe, the plight of Ukrainian refugees is shifting dramatically. With temporary protection extended until March 2026, authorities are tightening the rules. In Poland, where nearly 1 million Ukrainians have sought refuge, new employment and school attendance checks are being implemented. Meanwhile, Germany is contemplating the return of draft-age men back to Ukraine, raising a storm of emotions and fears. Sweden has joined the fray by announcing that starting October 1, 2025, it will no longer accept extended passports, forcing many into a precarious situation if they don't possess biometric documentation. Canada, once seen as a beacon of hope, is now requesting military documents from applicants for permanent residency, turning what seemed like a safe haven into a land of uncertainty. As autumn leaves begin to fall, the European Union confirms that the temporary protection regime will last until March 2026, but discussions about extending it to March 2027 reveal a tightening grip on aid. While acknowledging the dire situation in Ukraine, European nations are preparing to scale back support, leaving millions in a precarious position. To many, these developments signal the end of their hopeful chapter. This temporary status has granted Ukrainians access to employment, healthcare, and education within the EU, yet it starkly lacks the permanence of residency. The clear message from EU officials is that this safety net isn't designed for the long haul. Integration into society becomes paramount, compelling Ukrainian refugees to find new legal reasons to stay, be it through work contracts, education, or family reunification. Those who fail to act face the looming threat of deportation, engulfing their dreams in a dark cloud of uncertainty. The process is already underway in Poland, as bureaucratic hurdles rise like walls around those struggling to secure their futures. Can you hear the chaos of panic among families worried about compliance? The conditions are increasingly stringent, adults must find work, and children must attend school regularly to maintain their status. Checks will be frequent, and non-compliance means losing support just when it's needed most. In Germany, home to over 1.2 million Ukrainian refugees, discussions are shifting. The government's humanitarian approach is waning as the focus turns to integration, labor market engagement, and financial sustainability. Politicians are voicing concerns about the economic burden, suggesting that low workforce participation among Ukrainian refugees might lead to tougher measures. As debates heat up, the call for action grows stronger. Leaders are proposing that if peace remains elusive in Ukraine, it may be time to consider sending fit men back. The readiness to provide social support is dwindling against a backdrop of increasing pressure on the national budget. As the reality of a stricter system dawns, many will find their once promising sanctuary slipping away. The Nordic countries are also responding with hardline stances. Sweden's new policies signal a sharp turn, emphasizing biometrics as the future of law. No longer will document extensions be permitted, effectively navigating refugees towards desperation if they lack valid biometric identifiers. In Finland, integration support has been cut due to soaring costs, leaving refugees to fend for themselves in an unfamiliar land. Norway paints a different picture. Employment opportunities exist, but transitioning to long-term status remains elusive. As nationwide anxieties rise, Europe is tightening its grip. Refugees will only find solace if they integrate and contribute. Those who don't face uncertain futures, with doors closing and opportunities diminishing. Amidst these transformations, Canada sends chilling signals. Once a reliable refuge, it's now aligning policies with Ukraine's tense realities. The requirement for military duty documents creates an atmosphere of paranoia, making it clear that the road to permanent residency is fraught with obstacles. As these sweeping changes unfold, one has to wonder, can the dreams of millions survive in this evolving landscape of temporary safety? Previously we saw that Germany's temporary protection for 1.2 million Ukrainians stretches to March 2027, yet officials are shifting the debate from humanitarian aid to integration and budget pressure. Federal ministries and states tighten oversight, and job centers now demand proof of employment and an active job hunt. What if the safety net you rely on evaporates the instant you miss a single deadline? Imagine opening a modest envelope, hearing the thin rustle of paper, and discovering that your monthly stipend has been frozen. Could a missed stamp turn a promised refuge into a ticking time bomb? How many families will watch their hopes disintegrate as bureaucratic clocks grow louder, echoing in cramped kitchens where stale coffee steams over cold meals? Those without valid work reasons are being moved on to harsher benefit conditions. German press highlights a stark fact: the employment rate among Ukrainian refugees lags behind other migrant groups. This statistic fuels politicians pushing for a policy overhaul. A striking statement came from Bavaria's Prime Minister and Christian Social Union leader Markus Söder. He declared, if peace remains invisible in Ukraine, we must consider sending fit-for-service men back home. He argues that Germany cannot endlessly fund social welfare while labor participation stays low. His words sparked heated debate, mirroring a broader societal discussion. At the same time, Germany debates sweeping migration reforms. To shift from temporary protection to a long-term status, applicants will need solid work contracts, sufficient income, language proficiency, and tax contributions. Experts cite exact figures. Future permanent residency will require a documented salary that can support a family, plus a stable employment record. Language exams and pension contributions are also on the agenda. In essence, Germany aims to keep only those Ukrainians who can fully integrate and sustain themselves. For the rest, prospects become increasingly uncertain. Nordic nations are adopting a similarly tough stance. Sweden announced that, starting October 1, 2025, passports extended by consular stamps will no longer be accepted. Only a valid biometric document will grant border entry, effectively barring travelers who rely on older extensions. Finland followed suit, terminating its integration payment program that once funded language courses, job placement assistance, and short-term support. With a population of just over 5 million, the country could no longer shoulder hundreds of millions of euros in annual expenses. The question looms, will the next decree seal the borders, leaving countless Ukrainians stranded at the threshold, their futures hanging on a bureaucratic breath?